I think we are live, but let me just confirm that. Um, uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Are we audible? Can somebody tell me in the comments? Okay, so I think we are audible, sir. So good afternoon, everyone. Uh, First of all, a happy Holi to everyone, and welcome to our Sunday talk from Crohn's and Colitis Squad. Today we have with us Dr. Ajit Sood. He's the professor and head of gastroenterology department at the Dayanand Medical College and Hospital in Ludhiana, and he's also the secretary of Colitis and Crohn's Foundation of India. Today we will be discussing some things about inflammatory bowel disease, a short introduction, and post that introduction, we'll have a question answer session on the role of diet in IBD. So I thank you, sir, for joining us today and for giving, agreeing to talk to us and for this session. So, yeah, I think we should begin. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nikhil. In fact, I am grateful that you asked me to come and interact with you. That's the different kind of interaction which I love to do. In the hospital, what happens when a patient walks in?
Yeah.
There's always the next patient waiting.
Yeah.
So you have a very limited time.
Yeah.
Now, this is the kind of session where we can have more of informal
Yeah.
discussions, and it's always good to clarify your doubts.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, and I appreciate that you're doing a great
Thank
job.
you, sir.
And so, what I'm going to do, Nikhil, that I'll just make a short presentation that what is IBD.
Yes, sir.
I understand that everybody knows what is IBD, so I'm just going through a bit of IBD background so that we are on the same
Yes.
platform. Then, of course, there will be questions. Share the screen. Huh?
One second, sir. I'll just confirm that uh, this is visible. One second. Yeah, it's good now.
Okay, get going. Inflammatory bowel diseases basically there's not an echo.
Ah, okay. I'll just mute myself. Yes, sir. Continue. I'll just mute myself. Maybe that is the problem. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's better. So we use the word IBD generally for as a short form. IBD is basically mainly of two types: ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. At times, if you fail to put a patient in either of the two categories, then we call it as indeterminate colitis or unclassified colitis. So we'll be basically referring to ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease under IBD. Now, what is IBD? IBD basically, as the word implies, is an inflammatory condition. It's a chronic condition that affects our digestive tract. Ulcerative colitis is a disease which affects our large intestine, while Crohn's disease is a condition which can affect any part of the GI, right from oral cavity to rectum or anal canal. More than one side can be involved in Crohn's disease. While ulcerative colitis, rarely it can have mild inflammation spilling over to the small intestine, but by and large, it's a disease of the large intestine. And as you can see the color here, I mean, any part which is involved becomes more reddish. In fact, the only way our intestine can react to any toxic effect or any toxic exposure is by becoming more red. So this is how our inflamed mucosa look like. Whenever any person is labeled as IBD, the first question which comes to his mind or her mind is, why me? What wrong did I do?
Yeah.
Let me tell you very clearly, it's none of your fault. It can happen to any one of us, right? We are brought up in the same environment, we eat the same kind of food, but only some of us develop IBD. It's in the similar lines like all of us consume sugar, right? But only some of us develop diabetes. So it depends on our genes, our body makeup. So what really causes IBD? As I referred to that, what kind of health issues will crop up during our lifetime depends on our genes. And we acquire our genes from our parents. We have a particular set of genes with us. But genes alone will not lead to a disease like IBD. For disease to manifest, it's very, very important or it's essential that conducive environmental factors should be there to make the disease express itself. Otherwise, even if a genetic predisposition is there, if environmental factors are not there, person will be prone, but he will never have features of IBD. What has happened over the last few years is that one aspect of science which has been now really worked on is that diet, as we all know, that what we eat influences our health. Now, how does diet influences our health? For that, we have to understand that what we eat, it goes to the intestines, and our intestine has so many bacteria. You can say trillions of organisms inside. There are more than thousand, more than 5,000 in fact species. There are different kinds of bacteria, viruses, fungi inside the body. Most of them are healthy, what we call as commensal. And most of these organisms which are there are not there just for no reason. I mean, they're there for a reason. I mean, they have an important role to play in the sense that they protect our intestinal mucosa from various noxious agents. They provide a layer kind of thing and they don't let the harmful bacteria enter into our intestines. So they have a protective role. So what we eat, diet influences the kind of microorganisms what we harbor in our gut. That is how diet carries a lot of importance. And gut microbiome inside have a role to play in control of or in stimulation of immune system. What goes wrong in IBD is that our body's immune system becomes aberrant. So, diet, microorganisms can influence our immune system. If our microflora inside our intestine is not healthy, it can have a distortion of the immune system or immune system can become dysregulated. That actually manifests in disease like IBD. So diet, microbiome, microflora, and immune system. That is the network. Now I'll just show you here if you can focus on these few tubular structures. This is the epithelial lining of our intestine. Just a minute. Cursor. Can you have a cursor here? Sorry. Yes, now these are the epithelial cells. This is the lumen. Now, from lumen, if anything goes inside, these are the epithelial cells. And this, if you can read it, this is a thick mucus layer. This is how our intestine is composed of. That there is a thick mucus layer. Now, these red ones are the organisms which are not healthy. These are called as invasive bacteria. If these kind of bacteria enter our body, they can cause disease. Now, whenever these invasive organisms are there, our body's defense mechanisms comes into play, and these defenses they block the these invasive organisms. So they stop them from entering our body. Now, what this thick mucus layer is very important. And second is these epithelial cells. And if you can focus on this, these epithelial cells are very tightly joined to each other. This is called a tight junction between these two cells. So nothing can, penetrate through these epithelial cells until and unless there is some erosion, some ulceration, some inflammation, and there is loss of this protective mucus layer. So this is important to understand that once organisms they get entry into the epithelial cells, then they can affect our immune system here. Immune system resides here beneath the epithelial cells. So this is how is our gut protected by thick mucous barrier and tight junction of the epithelial cells. Now, world over, IBD is increasing. Why is it increasing? There are different reasons. Now, with time, there have been many changes, like the diet has changed. Diet has changed, and we are exposed to more kind of pollutants. There is more stress nowadays. I don't think anybody can ever say, Nikhil, that there's no stress. All of us are under stress, right? So we get so much more exposure to antibiotics, and infections are always there in developing countries like ours. Genes, our genes are such in India that we are not, our genes don't protect us from development of IBD. That is sad part.
Okay.
So because of changing diet, pollution, stress, infections, antibiotic exposure, these are the various reasons that the IBD is rising world over. Why we focus so much on diet is that diet is one that which has changed the maximum over last 20, 30 years. And diet is one factor which is modifiable factor. Genetics are not modifiable factor. Stress, I will say, it's so much easier to say don't get stressed out. But how can we live without stress? Stress is a very much part of our life now.
Yes.
So diet can easily be modified. If not easily, but at least can be modified. Now I'll just go through a few slides that how to suspect IBD. Now, generally somebody who's got chronic diarrhea. Chronic diarrhea means if it is more than 4 weeks, with or without blood, we should consider IBD as a possibility. Pain abdomen, weight loss, fever. Important is family history of IBD. Somebody in the family having IBD puts up another member at a little higher risk. The risk is not very, very substantial, but slight increase in risk is there. Then at times there could be joint pains or liver involvement, eye changes, liver changes, skin changes. These are the various other manifestations which can be seen in IBD.
Sir, what
This,
was the thing in the last picture? Like uh, the adjacent to the joint pain.
this is an ulcer. This is
Okay.
skin lesion. This is called as pyoderma gangrenosum. There could be cutaneous ulcers. It's called as pyoderma gangrenosum. We need to know that it is part of IBD because if pyoderma gangrenosum, if patient goes to surgeon, he says, okay, I will excise it or I'll clean it up. The more you clean, the more it spreads.
Okay.
So the treatment for pyoderma gangrenosum is such that we give only medical treatment. We don't touch it.
Okay.
If we try to excise the black margins, it will spread wider and wider. So it's very important that IBD should never be diagnosis should never be based on presumption. Now somebody has a diarrhea of say 1 year. We should not say that you are having IBD. We should say, okay, let me go through the required test, then I will say whether person has got IBD or not. And the other thing important to understand is that there is no single test which is pathognomonic. Pathognomonic means which is 100% definite for IBD. No test will say this is nothing else but IBD. So we need to depend on more than one test. So for that, we need to take into consideration the symptoms and the signs of a person. We need to do stool test to rule out infections, and of course, the certain other tests which will indicate it could be IBD, blood test. X-rays are very important now. We can do CT scan, we can do MRI. Endoscopic evaluation is the cornerstone of treatment for ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. We need to do colonoscopy practically for all patients. And then we have always to depend on biopsy or histology also. So diagnosis of IBD should be certain, should be absolutely sure before we say, okay, this is IBD. Other point to remember is that diagnosis of Crohn's disease is not in first visit. At times we need more time, right? We need to follow up a patient for some period of time before we say, okay, this is not any other disease, but it's more like Crohn's disease. As I said, that there is no single test which is pathognomonic. So when we go to a doctor, we should not say the doctor, okay, you tell me yes or no whether it is Crohn's disease or not. We can't. We say, okay, we need to follow you up for a longer period of time before we can say this is Crohn's or not. And one should not be in a hurry to start treatment. Because if once a person is labeled as Crohn's disease, if he goes to the next doctor, he will always say that he is a diagnosed case of Crohn's disease and he will continue the treatment from there onwards. We should not be in a hurry to, or we should not pressurize the doctor that you start treatment right now. We should tell the doctor, okay, make sure that whether I really have a Crohn's disease or not. Now, what is the treatment? Do we have drugs? We are lucky that today we have good number of drugs. To share with you, when I was doing undergraduation, there were just one or two drugs which were available to us. But thankfully, that time in India, IBD was also very, very mild. We never used to have so much of Crohn's disease. But with development, the Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis both are becoming more common and becoming quite severe kind of disease. Drugs are effective. There is a myth that IBD is not curable. I ask people that tell me which disease is curable. Is migraine curable? Is diabetes curable? Is hypertension curable? Is heart disease curable? Arthritis curable? We should not say curable or not. Is depression curable? If somebody is depressed today, or he can get into depression tomorrow again. Take, for example, simple example. Is paining today. What is the guarantee tomorrow next tooth will not become painful? So we should say, is it treatable or not? And I want to make it very, very clear that IBD is a treatable disease. Right? So this needs to have we need to conceptualize that this is a treatable disease. We should not say curable. Curable, there is very, very few conditions which can be really cured of. Like something like appendix. If you can remove appendix, one can say, okay, now appendicitis will not happen again. But you never know, there could be partial appendicectomy and it may still come and cause pain. So it's a treatable disease. Trust your doctors. We need to individualize the treatment because no two people are likely to have a similar set of symptoms and they are likely to have similar set of investigations. So the disease differs and the treatment protocols are different for different people. Important thing is that do not self-medicate. If somebody feels better, there could be a temptation that my doctor is giving me 6 tablets. So if I'm feeling better, why not reduce to 4 or 3 or 2? We are living in a developing countries where cost is one important factor. So we always say if I can get with two cure same relief with 2 medicines, why take 4 medicines? Why not economize? We should not do that because doctor only knows when to decrease the medicines. Otherwise, disease can come back. So this is what I have been referring that there is a temptation that can I stop or decrease medicines? One should never do that. And why I say that? Because the goal of our treatment is not only relief of symptoms. Symptomatic relief is important. That we have to get for the person. Symptoms relief is very, very important. Otherwise, person will not feel comfortable. But a goal of treatment is not just relief of symptoms. What we want that besides symptoms, The blood and the stool test should also be normal. Our endoscopy picture, which was inflamed earlier, should also get better to normal. Not only endoscopy picture appearance wise, but even histology or biopsy wise also should be normal. And in future, we will say even molecular tests, we should also make it that the immune system, as I referred to earlier, that the immune system becomes dysregulated. Even that should be normal. Then we can say yes, there is a complete cure. Then I can say okay, the cure can also be considered for IBD. Now this is how the endoscopy looks like when we go from left to right. You can see that this picture is translated. There are so many, red areas. These are ulcers. This is partial healing and this is absolutely normal healing. So this is what we wish to achieve for every person. That with treatment, we want to take from 1 to 3 levels. If we stop our treatment here, at this stage, there is a very high probability that person will go back to the stage. So if we want that person should remain healthy, we have to ensure that we achieve this stage before we cut down the medicines. So this is very vital to understand that with at this stage, person's diarrhea may be controlled, but we don't want external recovery only. We want internal healing. This is what is internal healing. If I can put it in simple words that we want mucosa should heal before we cut down the medicine, so we can think of decreasing the medicine. The same thing is shown here that we should not stop medicines here. We have to ensure that mucosa or this is biopsy also show complete recovery. Now coming to India, that what is the status of IBD in India? As you can see, the number of patients in IBD are increasing. And India's population is so huge that if we talk of disease burden in India, it's a huge disease burden. Its disease burden in India may be comparable to disease burden in US. While disease is much, much more common in US compared to India. But our population is so big that when we count the numbers in India may surpass the numbers of IBD patients in US. Why is it increasing? Does diet matter? Now I'll show you that what the scene used to be around 30, 40 years back. I mean, this used to be our diet. I mean, chapati, rice, and vegetables, and few salads, right? And we used to play gilli danda. I don't know anybody now knows what is gilli danda. And this is what I don't know how many of you can really know the name of this game. It's Pittu.
Pittu, yeah.
Because you know this game, Pittu?
Yes, yeah. Today it's more like PUBG and all those things.
So this is how people used to work in farms, right? But now what is the scene? Imagine that both parents are glued to laptop, and children are to the video games, and this is so tempting to us. So tempting to us. I mean, between chapati and burger, who will go for a chapati? All of us will undoubtedly go for burger. And see the child's concentration and the mobile in his hands. And everybody is glued to this. So the life has changed from yellow to red. Our intestines or IBD is on the rise. That is what I say. I mean, there is a transition which is happening. And to prove this point, I just show you a few of the statistics that India is the second biggest manufacturer of sweet beverages globally. This is a study published in a scientific journal. This is a great concern for us that we are consuming so much of sweet beverages. When it comes to noodles market, our noodle market has increased exponentially. In 2009, it used to be less than 0.5 billion. It used to be 0.25 billion or something like that. While in 2019, it is now closing to 2 billion. And India's per capita soft drink consumption is now reaching up to 84 bottles a year by this year. That means we are taking all of our average Indian is consuming one soft drink every third day. So you can imagine that our lifestyle is changing so much. And India has become the fast food destination, the new fast food destination. And fast food market is touching now $6 billion. And this is not an uncommon scene that we have fruits on the table, we have a mug of juice on the table, but just see how the juice container is being used. Not to pour juice from that, but just to support the iPad, right? And their eyes are glued to the screen. So this is what is a day-to-day scene. We have so many options, so many choices. So what should I eat? If we say that what should be a preferred diet? I'll say that cereals, vegetables, fruits, and dried fruits. And we should avoid fried food and pickles and chutney and processed food. If we think of or if we talk of fried food and processed food, these are not poisonous, but these should not be a staple. That is what matters. 3 days in a week we should not be consuming this time. Our staple food should still be what it used to be in India's diet. And we have a challenge. IBD is a challenge. So we can tackle this challenge with IBD, meaning that we need to tackle IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, with intelligently balanced diet. So this is where we need to really focus on. And even if somebody has IBD, we can still live happily and lead a healthy life even with IBD. So that was it, Nikhil. I just made initial,
Yeah.
groundwork for more discussions on IBD, and love to have a
Yeah.
question answer session.
Yes.
Any kind of doubts in anybody's mind, most welcome, please.
I think that was a very good presentation, sir, and you, I think, answered two of the most commonly asked questions, like why me, and like should I stop medication? Like those are like everybody keeps asking this, and no matter how many times we say, I think there are still some people like who stop medications and who still like have that urge to decrease their medications or stop medications when symptoms are not happening. But yeah, I think we'll go ahead with the questions that like we had previously written, and you already told us about like why diet has become a new scientific focus, but just to like reiterate, so in recent times interest in the role of diet in IBD has considerably increased among physicians. So what are the reasons for it?
For IBD, there are various drugs available into more of immunosuppressive therapy. We are going into biologics. Now, with availability of so many drugs, still if we say the drugs are 100% effective, the answer is clear no. Still, there are a good number of patients who just don't who
Yes.
just don't respond to the available drugs. And then we are now understanding that how diet can cause IBD. At the same time, there are studies which have convincingly shown that with dietary intervention, IBD improves. I will say that the studies have shown that when diet has been used as a standalone therapy, like enteral nutrition, exclusive enteral nutrition, there are studies which have shown that exclusive enteral nutrition as a standalone therapy works for Crohn's in children. It is as effective as use of steroids in children for Crohn's disease. So if there is a choice between enteral nutrition and use of steroids, it is not a, you don't need to be a genius to go for a diet therapy. The side effects are so few, and any kind of natural therapy will, if can put you back on a normalcy, that anybody would prefer. So we have understood now, we are understanding that diet can make an impact.
And sir, like even before this, patients have been trying different kind of diets since a long time. Like there's the SCD diet, there's the low FODMAP diet. Some go on paleo diet. So is there any medical literature that supports the use of such diets in IBD?
Yes, Nikhil, very, very important question that what kind of diet is being tried. Actually, when we talk of diet, now I showed you that India is now consuming more of sweet beverages, noodles, and burgers, this kind of junk food. But there's no study which have directly linked any particular kind of food to IBD. So we say that there is an association between a particular kind of food and occurrence of IBD. We have not been able to prove that yes, this particular kind of diet actually is responsible for IBD. We are saying that both are running parallel. So medical literature says this is an association. This is not a, this doesn't prove it being a causative thing. So I mean there is evidence that the changing diet and increasing IBD prevalence are going, in parallel.
Hmm.
Right now, question is that if we say the diet, that makes us understand diet is important. Now, question is that what kind of diet? Paleo diet, Mediterranean diet, or specific carb diet, anti-inflammatory diet. There are different kinds of diets. Now, the focus of all kinds of diet are these are called as exclusion diets. So we exclude particular kind of food items. Like most of these diets, they will exclude cereals. Gluten being the common exclusion item. We exclude gluten and other cereals. In specific carbohydrate diet, we don't recommend any kind of cereals. We don't recommend any kind of dairy products except hard cheeses or yogurt, which is fermented for more than 24 hours. Similarly, the Mediterranean diet is based more on consumption of vegetables, fruits, and nuts. They also cut down the cereals and dairy to some extent, and red meat in particular. So various kinds of diets have been tried, but at the moment, if we say that this kind of diet really works for IBD, at the moment we don't have any answer to this. There is one study in literature which is called as CD3 diet, which is which has been developed based on enteral nutrition formula, which is popular in Europe. Now, I refer to exclusive enteral nutrition. So, this formula modeling is being used in Europe for treating Crohn's disease. So, based on the constituents of modeling in Europe, one group has come up with a diet which has a similar constituents as used in modeling. With that, they have found that if the patients of Crohn's disease they consume that kind of diet, the chances are that the disease will remain under check.
Okay. Sir, one question I'd like to ask, like, let's say, like, for a person with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, you recommend a certain kind of diet. Is like, should a normal person be also like taking that diet, or like, is it healthy for normal people also, or like, let's say somebody might think that okay, this diet will keep me from all other diseases or like whatever. So, would you recommend that diet to, like, would you recommend a normal person also to not take any cereals or not take any dairy?
No, no, not really. Now, coming one by one, now when it comes to dairy, now if we think of dairy, I mentioned that specific carb diet also permits yogurt. So, if in India specifically, we talk of our country, curd and milk are two rich sources of calories and calcium. Now, and other vitamins, vitamin D.
Hmm.
If we restrict a person to totally avoid dairy, we don't permit milk, we don't permit curd, then it becomes quite restrictive, at least in our country. Milk has lactose, yogurt doesn't have so much of lactose. So what we see that most of the people who have symptoms with consumption of milk are more related to lactose rather than milk intolerance otherwise. So we permit curd to all these patients. And we say you can take milk in moderation. If you feel symptoms increase, then we need to cut down milk. Otherwise, we don't restrict. Now, if you say that at this moment, will I write on a prescription that go on a paleo diet, go on specific carb diet? At the moment, we are not in a position. Most of the patients who are on diet restriction are self-imposed restrictions. very, very few patients are actually on diet restrictions as per medical guidance. So there is a wide gap between patient's perception and doctor's perception. And there is a gap between patient's recommendation for himself or herself and doctor's recommendation. This is what we need to bridge. That whenever patient thinks of going on a particular kind of diet, be it specific carb diet or Mediterranean diet, person should get in touch with the doctor, and on doctor's recommendation only one should take on this diet. Otherwise, there is a possibility that nutritional deficiencies might crop up.
Okay. And so, and like you said that in Europe there's a diet being developed. In US also there's this popular anti-inflammatory diet. So is there any research in our country on developing such a diet?
At the moment, everybody is talking of diet. Dr. Vineet's group is also working on diet. We are also working on diet. And Dr. Vineet's group has shown that diet works for even patients with ulcerative colitis. In fact, theirs is the first study which has shown that diet modifications or specific kind of diet works for patients with sick patients with ulcerative colitis also. So this is a new concept which is coming up, and at the moment all of us are working, but there are many challenges when we plan a study for diet. One, that diet becomes very, very restrictive. Availability of a particular kind of diet in India at the moment is not there. If we say, if you say that we want to put a patient on, say, Mediterranean diet, or we want to restrict a patient on specific carb diet. Now all of us are used to take cereals as a part of our diet. And when we put a patient, when we take him off cereals altogether, dairy altogether, right, then it becomes very, very restrictive, which is not sustainable in the long run. So I would say at the moment research is on, but we don't have a clear recommendation to follow any particular kind of diet at this moment. Maybe when we talk 2 years down the lane, maybe we have an answer.
So, and like how can patients contribute to this research? Like how can patients get into all this process? Like how are people recruited? And maybe there are some people who like to go on a diet or like to try this kind of thing. So how can they be a part of these things?
Yes, like Nikhil, people who are or teams who are working on IPD, like in our center also, now most of our patients with Crohn's are on one group of patients, like either they are on a normal diet, or they are on partial anti-nutrition diet, or they are on CD treat diet. Means CD treat in the sense that formula based diet. So we put these patients on a particular group. Okay, that you choose between these three kind of diets. So we are also trying to study, but at the moment, what patients can do is that patients can share their experiences with the doctor. At the moment what we have is that we follow certain guidelines, certain guidelines in the sense that we know what kind of food items are good, what kind of food items are not good. So we follow that, and to some extent our judgment is based on the common sense, that what kind of food does a suit a given individual. He has to cut down that. Now it's not that one size will fit all kind of situation will not happen in IPD. There may be people who don't like curd at all. While we recommend that take plenty of curd, people say I don't want curd. So I mean curd medical point of view is very good. But if it doesn't suit a person, he says my throat goes bad with the curd, then we can't help it.
Yeah. Um, and so my next question is, are dietitians in India aware about the specific needs of people with IBD, and where should patients with IBD go for good advice on their diet?
Yes, it's a very, very relevant question. In fact, Nikhil, we have thought of myself, we have started a program, diet. This is diet in IBD and education and the training program. Diet in IBD, training and education. We have started a program where we impart training to dietitians for IBD diet. We are done with one session. The second session is to begin. First session was joined by I think 15 dietitians.
Okay.
So gradually, there will be more awareness, and there will be more and more. IBD expert dietitians. So we hope that more people will choose this as a career.
So, um, yeah, I think we discussed a bit about this, but again, that question, sir, can the right diet keep someone in remission and prevent flare-ups? Uh, I think in this context, I mean to ask that without medications, like if a patient wants to substitute like say they are in remission and they just want to go off medications, or maybe they are okay with a restrictive diet that keeps them in remission. So is that possible, like just with diet to stay in remission?
At the moment, if we say that can diet be used as a standalone therapy, I will say that exclusive anti-nutrition can be used as the only therapy for patients with Crohn's disease in younger population, children, Crohn's disease. In adults, it can be tried, or even semi-vegetarian diet can be recommended. Some people put them on pure vegetarian diet. That also helps. If a person's disease is very mild, now suppose somebody has very mild Crohn's, typically also we know it's a very mild disease. If a person wants to go on particular kind of diet, vegetarian diet, right, for a long term, if your symptoms are very minimal, I will be comfortable. I will say, okay, if your symptoms are we check the inflammatory markers, we keep a watch on the blood test, stool test, and we do a periodic colonoscopy. If disease is in remission, I will say, okay, you are fine. But at the moment, we can't make a generalized statement that yes, diet alone can treat IBD. At the moment, we can't make this statement. But exclusive anti nutrition decrease to be used for a limited period. That is for 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks. After 8 to 12 weeks, there are two options. When a person is in remission, when gradually he goes to a normal table food, there is a possibility that medicines will control the disease. Or what is we can put them on partial anti-nutrition. And there could be partial table food and partial anti-nutrition. This kind of path, we can say a middle path, can also keep the patients in remission for a long time.
And sir, like we like with IBD flare-ups is a part of IBD. So we are always guessing like what caused our flare-up. Sometimes we think that's food. Sometimes we think that's stress. So can eating the wrong kind of food cause a relapse, or is it always food, or like can there be some other reason for a flare-up also? Like is it always food, and uh, always food the reason that we have a flare up?
A very, very important question that what really triggers IBD? Flare, what triggers a relapse in patient's IBD? I will say that if a person has been taking a healthy diet, that diet suits his gut. Now, what happens is when there is a sudden change in diet, that may result in sudden change in microbiome inside our gut. That might tilt the balance. Sudden change in our microbiome inside our gut may influence the immune system in a wrong way. That might, cause aggravation of symptoms. So I look at it that sudden change, or we call it as deviations, major deviations in diet may, I'm saying may cause relapse, but it is not, it causes relapse, may cause relapse. Same time, there are other things like consumption of antibiotics, painkillers, sudden extreme stress, right? Exposure to certain pollutants, smoking habits. Somebody starts smoking, right? So these are the things which can precipitate relapse. For ulcerative colitis, literature says that people who are smokers, if they suddenly stop smoking, that can aggravate ulcerative colitis. But we don't ever recommend to people who are smokers that you continue smoking. We say that you should stop smoking, right? Because it's your body, it's not your gut only. And the risk of precipitation, aggravation of colitis is very, very minimal. I am not a believer in this. I tell them strongly that you have to stop smoking.
Actually, I think this, like some patients have talked about this, like smoking will help you control all ulcerative colitis. But
No,
yeah, it's more about you have lungs also.
no. On the contrary, if we talk of smoking and IBD, smoking, I'm saying, may be protective for ulcerative colitis. Now, if doctor says alcohol may be protective for heart, people take yes, it protects heart. Same if I say smoking may be protective for ulcerative colitis, people say yes, it protects. When we say something like that, but when we say smoking can aggravate Crohn's, people will not accept it. If it's a situation where if there are two reports, different reports for a disease, the blood test done from two labs show the different reports. We always tend to believe the report which is more normal. We say the other lab where the report is wrong has given us a wrong report. So this is normal human psyche.
Yeah. And so, like, most of us are on some restrictions on diet, but what patients usually do is we have a cheat day where, like, we eat what we want. Sometimes we have a pizza, and we usually suffer also the next day. But, like, is it possible that one cheat day causes a very big relapse and, like, that it destabilizes our condition and it leads to a big flare up? Is that possible? Like, should we be so afraid of having a cheat day, or like totally?
I I will say, Nikhil, we need to strike a balance. Now, cheat day doesn't mean you do a robbery. In the sense that don't go for a street kind of food and don't have golgappas kind of thing. That will be asking for a bit too much. Now, if eating out may not be so bad, eating a burger in a clean place may not be so bad. I will, I believe that person who's having IBD should not be made to feel all along that he is a patient. We should try to lead a normal life as far as possible. So once in a while, if we want to go out and eat outside food, I would say yes. But be watchful that what you're eating. Don't take very spicy food. If you take golgappa, that pani, golgappa pani, I think that is very tough. That will put anybody's stomach
Okay. Yeah.
bad. So one should avoid this kind of food. One should not go for extremes of food.
Yeah. Cheat, but
And
don't
but
be reckless.
well,
Yeah. Uh, so, yes, sir. Like you said that this diet becomes restrictive, and uh, people with IBD often have problems maintaining levels of many macro and micronutrients. Like, anyways, we have low iron. Most of us have low iron, and then there's lack of vitamin D, B12, calcium also. So, uh, like, how can we maintain normal levels of these nutrients with diet? Is it possible, or like, should we always be consuming this oral supplements and tablets?
no, we don't need to. Actually, malnutrition important part of IBD patients. When we diagnose IBD, good number of patients have features of malnutrition. They have anemia, they have low albumin. These are two very common findings in these people. And most of the time, the anemia is iron deficiency anemia or B12 deficiency. Most of these patients are vitamin D deficient, so they can have bony pains, they can have features relating to anemia. So it's important that we replace these deficiencies. Somehow, regarding iron, when mucosa is inflamed, if we give iron to these patients, iron is not very good for our intestinal mucosa. Iron can irritate the intestinal mucosa and cause aggravation of symptoms. So we avoid giving oral iron to patients with IBD till their mucosa is healed. If there is a gross iron deficiency, we generally give them IVR, intravenous iron. This is one. Calcium supplements and vitamin D supplements, folic acid supplements. So these things we can easily give. Either we can give as a shot, B12 shots available, or B12 tablets are available, or nowadays good films are also available. That sublingual tablets are available. So replacement of these things have to be taken care of in the initial phase of the disease. Once a person's disease is in remission and these nutritional deficiencies have been replaced, there onwards, if a person takes a normal diet, it is sufficient. We don't need to put them on lifelong supplements if disease is in remission. If disease remains active for a long time, then of course we need to supplement.
Uh, and so another popular, I think, topic is probiotics among patients. So is it a good idea to have them in our diet? And if yes, then like what should be the source for probiotics? Like should we have more fermented foods, or like we should have tablets like this Bifilac and VSL3? Like there's a lot of talk about this like, every time this question pops up. So like what would your the answer to be all this?
Probiotics is important group of drugs. Now, when we talk of our microflora inside our gut, probiotics is one way of influencing our
Excuse me, sir.
microbiome.
I just like to interrupt you. Like probiotics are a like category of drug or like diet kind of thing. Like what exactly are they?
Probiotics are drugs, like antibiotics. Like all antibiotics are not same. At the same time, I'll say that all probiotics are also not same. Now, what you have been asking me that whether people should take probiotic as a diet supplement or not, I will say clear no to this. Probiotics as a diet supplement in inadequate dose is not going to help at all. If somebody takes one or two capsules of ESL3 or Bifilac once in a while, no, this is not the treatment. When we use probiotics, we use it as a therapy, then we need to use in a very high concentration. In fact, we have published one study, important study in VSL3. It did work for patients with ulcerative colitis. Problem is the consumption is very high number, pill load is very high, and then we need to document that yes, microflora changes. But if somebody says, okay, along with the food, he is just taking it as a supplement or like multivitamin, is consuming one or two capsules once in a week or twice in a week, no, absolute use. It's not going to serve any purpose. We should not go for this.
And so like you talked about intelligently balanced diet. So what does that look like for someone with diabetes? Obviously, like it will be different for everyone, but in general, like crudely, what does it look like? Like what does it consist of?
See, now what should be a diet? Now, if we think of it, what we have been eating all along, or what our ancestors have been eating. See, we depend on cereals, right? Fats to some extent, vegetables, fruits, like vegetables, fruits and salads, nuts, and dairy to some extent. This is what Indian traditional Indian diet has been. Cereals, fat to some extent. We have been lacking somewhere in protein consumption if you look at Indian diet earlier years. Nowadays, that protein content is also better. We take a lot of dairy, we depend on eggs, which provide good quality protein. So that way, Indian diet is quite rich now. What we should avoid is that excessive fat and sweets. If you ask me what is undesirable in the diet is at the moment it's extra fat plus sweets. If we can cut down these two and refined food, refined sugars and refined carbs like maida. If it is a choice between wheat and maida, prefer wheat. And if we can just cut down on processed foods and food additives. Now, the food additives are in items like sausages, ice creams, and sweetened lassi and sweetened milk. You don't know, I mean, we don't know. The various kinds of food additives are added to increase the shelf life. So, this is what is more harmful. If we have to have lassi, then go for a fresh lassi rather than a canned lassi. I will say that if you have to cut down extra fats, sweets, and more of processed, go for a simple and fresh food rather than processed. These are, more likely to do harm when food additives are used. Because food additives have been documented to affect the mucus layer, what I showed you. That they thin down our mucus layer in the gut. Once mucus layer gets damaged, there are more chances of invasion by the bacteria.
And sir, like I remember I was diagnosed in 2013, and like when I had asked about like what to eat, and I was just advised that stay away from painkillers and spices. Like that. So like now, like has that conversation changed? And now, like, are you telling all your patients, regardless of whether they ask or not, like that diet is an important part of this therapy, and like you have to control it? Like, has that conversation changed in clinics?
Yes, yes, we have come a long, long way. We have a dietitian who's dedicated. So we have a diet chart which is which is two parts, one for active disease, one for quiescent disease. So one during relapse and one during remission. So we send all patients to dietitians. So you understand that for docs it's difficult to spend so much,
Hmm.
which maybe there in a person's mind whether to take or not to take, and become difficult in a clinic.
Yeah.
But we refer all our patients to dietitians, and we have a well worked up diet plan, diet chart for patients' diabetes, which has been discussed thoroughly.
Hmm. Okay. Uh, and this mostly patients with IBD are very young. Some of us are like I think teenagers, and some of us are in our 20s, and like we have studies and we are trying to build our careers. Some of us are staying away from home, some are in hostels. So like maintaining a proper diet becomes a very challenge kind of thing. So like what advice or like tips do you have for such patients? Like how to make that balance? Like obviously it can be perfect, but like any tips that you think might help us apart from learning to cook?
Yeah, that is right. And you people don't have so much time to cook. You guys have to read so much, in 20s. This is a sad part that IBD is a disease which affects the young people, right? When they really want to go out, they freak out and play sports and do gymming and build their body. IBD comes and it derails the whole thing. But at the same time, I think the couple of tips which I want to share with you. That one, that we accept that yes, I have IBD. One should not go for unplanned kind of things. Now, if you have to move from home to a hostel, right, we should have a planning. We should ensure that mess provides a particular kind of food. And if like nowadays, most of the people they consider it. I mean, the mess,
Hmm.
the cafeteria, they consider it. If you say that you have this problem, they provide you that kind of diet. So it's not the situation which used to be 30, 40 years ago when they say this is the only kind of food we are going to cook in the mess. Whether you take it or you don't take it, it is up to you. Now people are considerate, they understand, and the hostel wardens are there. We should talk to the parents, should talk to the warden that yes, child or what has this kind of problem. So they should be planned kind of thing. And second, avoid extra or sudden stress. Now, this is regarding studies also. I tell all IBD patients that don't leave your studies till the exam comes, because you will not be able to handle the stress in a similar manner as other person.
Yeah.
And if you are anemic, your efficiency goes down slightly. So I tell them that start working from day one. That this is a bit of planning. That you know that you are health wise, you're minimally compromised in the sense that you need to be more watchful. So why don't we can plan out things in advance? That okay, I will start working for this semester right from day one rather than leaving things, till the last 2 months or so. Avoid certain kind of thing. And third, I mentioned that don't get tempted to alter medication without doctor's advice. And don't take any other medicines even without doctor's advice. Even for minor ailments. So many of us, we take over the counter available painkillers, antibiotics. Minor throat pain, even if it is viral, we go for antibiotics.
Hmm.
Antibiotics will not work for viral infections or flu, but we do take antibiotics. Now, such unrequired, unwanted medicines can kill our bacteria in the gut
Hmm.
and can change or alter our microflora, and this may act as a trigger. So these are general tips. Yes.
Hmm. I think like I have suffered because of that delaying studies thing. So like one semester I had I think 2 3 exams in like 2 days, and like there was one subject and I had not studied and I kept delaying it, and in the end I got a C. So yeah, I think I wouldn't recommend anyone with IBD to just delay their studies like till that exam. And
No, no, yes, yes. I tell patients that you should be motivated more to do better than others. Yes, and do be regular. I will say that be regular. You can achieve as much as others, or you can do better than others. I
yeah,
tell them that because you need to be regular with
yeah,
the studies. That is it.
yes,
And people can lead a normal life. They can play sports and they can do gymming. But I recommend them that do muscle building for the arms rather than there should not be any stress on the abdominal muscles. This is my observation that if you put too much pressure on the abdominal muscles, that can, kind of create problems at times.
And sir, regarding this college thing, like, do you think there should be some awareness programs or like some like educational programs in colleges and like schools also, since this is on the rise in IBD? And do you think like this should benefit patients so that the school administration or the college people also know that there's a certain kind of population that has certain kind of needs?
Definitely, yes, there is a great, great need. I think what we lack, couple of things in our schools. Now, looking back, we can make out that what we missed out in the school. Nobody taught us what is a healthy diet. I think this is one area where we should do. Now, healthy diet should not be focused only on IBD. It should be focused on heart. It should be focused on lung disease. Should be focused on diabetes. Should be focused on overweight. There should be lectures on what healthy diet is. And healthy diet, if you focus on healthy diet, it will automatically cover up for prevention of IBD also. So this is one area where we need to educate our children.
Uh, and sir, like, I think we are going to end, but like I'll ask you two concluding questions. And so we already know that like IBD is rising, but still like support for like patients, especially young patients in the social sphere is very limited because one thing is there's lack of awareness, there's some stigma also, it's a bowel disease, and there's also lack of people who are going to speak up for IBD in India. Like even if a school kid has problems, like even during my time in my like I was diagnosed during my fourth year and it was just the beginning of the semester, and I gave all my medical certificates, but like I didn't get any benefit. Like I had to completely miss my exams and there were no makeup exams for me, so like there's nobody to speak up for us. So, and with this initiative, like we are trying to become a voice for the IBD population in our country. So what advice do you have for us, like, or for other people who uh, want to become a voice for the IBD patients in India?
I think excellent. Nikhil, I must congratulate you that you are really thinking great. One, that because you have personal difficulties, so we should ensure that other people don't undergo the same difficulties in their lifetime. Once somebody has a IBD, because it affects in young people, it's very, very important that we have patient support groups. Right now, to share with you, like what Colitis and Crohn's Foundation India, what we are doing is that at our place, we have a CCF India card, which entitles patient to get subsidy on the medicines. This is around 30% subsidy on the medication because this is one important aspect because cost is an important thing and people as it affects the young people, they are not earning at that time, so they depend on the parents. So costing also becomes an important thing. So this is something what we do. Second, we have a IPT helpline. There is a counselor who is available 24 into 7. At the moment, we can't take up calls, but we recommend that you message. He will reply. But we need to improve on our IPT helpline also. But what you are saying is a patient support group. This is a very, very important aspect, which at the moment for IPT in India, there are no patient support groups. But there is a great need. And I wish that you take initiative in this.
Yes, sir.
And during our this Colitis Crohn's Foundation meetings, I discussed with Dr. take it forward. And we would like that we project this new concept that patient support groups are very vital for our country. And I'm sure there is a lot which needs to be done and which can be done. With people like you around, I'm sure that we can make enough noise that next time somebody has this kind of difficulties, he is heard of.
And sir, like my final question would be, uh, like what is your opinion on what the future looks like for the Indian IBD population? Because as patients, we often feel that in different parts of the world, the care that IBD patients are getting is much better than what we are getting, and not in terms of like medical care, but I think rather more like an like social acceptance and like lack of insurance. Like there are a lot of other hurdles that we face that make our lives more complicated than IBD patients in, let's say, US or UK. So like as a doctor, what directions do you see IBD care in India to be going in? Like is it hopeful, or like um, what in general do you think, like let's say if somebody gets diagnosed with IBD today and he's in their like teens and 20s, like today versus like maybe 10 years back, or like and maybe 10 years from now, so like what direction do you see improvement or anything?
There have been many changes, and I will say major changes in our perception of the disease, diagnostic facilities for the disease, the availability of IPT experts in the country, the availability of ancillary services in the country, the availability of the drugs in the country. There have been many, many changes, and many more changes are still required in the country. Earlier on, people thought that anybody who's got diarrhea, even if it was a chronic diarrhea, we always used to, the possibilities considered were infections, infections, and infections. Nowadays, anybody who's got a diarrhea of 4 weeks duration, right, people have started thinking that IBD could be there. So I will say that people are medical healthcare providers are becoming more aware about this disease. So diagnosis or suspicion for the diagnosis is better, but still not optimal. If you say that, if you ask me whether there is adequate awareness among healthcare providers, I would say at the moment no. The reason being that IPT has not been a common disease in developing countries like India so far. It is only for last 30, 40, 30 years, I would say, where there has been a major rise, right? So it will take some time for all healthcare providers, to accept that IBD is very much there and we need to have a low index of suspicion and go for the investigations fast. Regarding availability of drugs, I would say most of the drugs are available, but not all drugs. The biologics, which are quite expensive, are still out of reach of an average patient in India with IBD. But even then, I will say that still to treat IBD in the country, even with the availability of the limited number of drugs. But I would say that that limited limitation is there, but not a major limitation. With time, more and more drugs are coming to our country, and patients with IBD are likely to make full use of the available. At the moment, if you ask me, there are two ways in which maximum research is going on for IBD treatment. One is the development of various biological agents, biologics. Second is the microbiome science. Microbiome science, we didn't touch upon this today. It's a different topic. This area is of special interest to us. We are working on a fecal microbiota transplant. We have reasonably good experience with fecal microbiota transplant, and let me share with you that fecal microbiota transplant has reasonably good results for ulcerative colitis. So, if we compare the costing of biologics and entity like fecal microbiota transplant, the cost difference is huge. So, we have to focus on problems and usefulness and the cost effectiveness of the various therapies in our country. I feel this is one area where we can do more kind of research. We can see whether FMT can help more and more number of patients. At the moment, we have a limited experience of using this for Crohn's, but in future, we are likely to have more experience of F15 clones. So let's see whether microbiome science, stands the test of time and proves itself to be a good therapy. That will open a new horizon because this this kind of modality is cheaper. This suits countries like India, where the availability is better, while the cost of biologics is really very very high. That still remains out of reach of most of the patients in India.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving us so much of our time. Doctors in our country are anyways so overloaded. So, like, I really appreciate anyone coming and like talking for an hour and over that. So, like, thank you very much for giving us so much of your precious time, and like, wish you a happy Holi also.
Thank you.
And yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you so much. I'm grateful that you asked me to come and interact with you.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Thank
And
you. Okay,
hopefully,
good
we'll
luck.
talk to you sometime soon later
Okay,
on
good
some other
luck.
topic. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Bye.